The sun was dropping toward the trees along Highway 27 when the old gas station settled into its usual routine. 4 pumps, a faded canopy, a small convenience store humming with bad fluorescent lights. A pickup idled by one pump, a minivan by another. A long-haul truck pulled off to the side while its driver ate out of a paper wrapper. It was background America, the kind of stop people used, not noticed. The highway saints had parked in a clean line along Pump 3. 4 bikes, road dust on the chrome, engines still ticking from the heat. Rex Dalton stood at the end, watching the numbers climb on the pump, one hand resting on his handlebars. Tank leaned on his own bike, big shoulders against the seat, eyes drifting over the lot out of habit more than curiosity. Doc was just coming back from the store with a coffee in one hand and a receipt in the other. Raven sat sideways on her bike, helmet off, one boot down, scanning the lot the way people who grew up in group homes learned to scan rooms. Cars came and went. A kid whined in the back seat of the minivan. The trucker crumpled his wrapper and tossed it in a can. Nothing special. Then the beige van came around the bend too fast. It swung in from the side road that met the highway, front end dipping as the driver hit the brakes hard. The side door slid open with a rough metal scrape. A small girl spilled out, catching herself on her hands, then scrambling to her feet. She was barefoot. Her hoodie was too big, the kind that came from donation drives, with a worn Outreach logo on the front and dirt ground into the sleeves. Her hair was tangled, cheeks streaked, eyes wide in a way that made Raven sit up straighter. The girl spun once toward the van, then toward the highway, like her brain was picking between bad options. Then she ran. A silver SUV hit its brakes at the entrance, tires squealing as she cut in front of it. The driver swore and leaned on the horn. She never looked. She sprinted across the lot, past the open store door, past the family at Pump 1, straight for the row of motorcycles, for the leather vests, for the man at the end of the pump whose eyes were already on her. Rex saw the bare feet, the raw skin on her heels, the way her hands were already reaching for him before she got there. She crashed into his chest, small and shaking, and grabbed 2 fistfuls of his vest, like she was afraid he might vanish if she didn't hang on. Her breath came in short, hard gasps. The words tore out of her throat, high and panicked, loud enough to cut through the sound of engines and humming lights. "He's coming!" For a second, after the words left her mouth, the lot went tight and still. Inside the store box, the cashier's scanner hovered in midair as his eyes lifted toward the pumps. Rex felt the girl's fingers locked in his vest, and his body dropped into an old pattern. He shifted his weight, set his boots, and put himself squarely between her and the open drive. His mind went straight to inventory. The van still idling across the way, the church sticker on the bumper, the side door hanging half closed, the cameras under the canopy, one aimed at Pump 3, another watching the lane in and out. Tank had already turned his big frame into a wall a few feet to the side, shoulders squared toward the entrance. Years of moving freight had given him a feel for balance. Years on the road had taught him which movements meant trouble. His eyes bounced from the girl's scraped legs to the van, to the 2 ways a vehicle could enter and exit the lot, tracing where something could run and how it could be cut off if it tried. Doc realized he was already closer, coffee still in his hand. Half-finished social work classes came back in a rush. Kids who showed up scared in public places, homes and programs that looked good on paper and felt wrong up close. All of that sat in the back of his mind while the front stayed on one fact. A barefoot kid in an outreach hoodie had just picked a line of bikers over every other adult in sight. Raven read a different set of signs. The way the girl's shoulders were pulled in tight, like she was used to making herself smaller. The way her eyes never searched for a parent, a clerk, a patrol car, just stuck on leather and patches, as if that was the safest thing she could see. Raven had stood in parking lots with that same knot in her stomach more than once, wondering if anyone would look twice. She knew the look of a child who already understood that most people would rather accept a tidy story than deal with a messy truth. Out by the road, the beige van's brake lights flared as the driver eased it off the shoulder and began rolling toward the entrance, closing the distance one car length at a time. She did not let go. Her fists stayed locked in Rex's vest, like her fingers had forgotten how to open. He shifted once more, one small step back that put her behind his shoulder instead of pressed against his chest. His body now a barrier between her and the lane the van would have to take to reach them. Up close, she looked even smaller. 10, maybe 11. Bare feet gray with road dust and fresh scrapes. Hoodie hanging past her hips, fabric thin and worn from too many washes. The logo across the front was cracked, but still readable. New Dawn Outreach Home. A little sunburst over the word dawn. Raven saw it and filed it away. She had worn free hoodies like that too. Ads for places that promised a lot and delivered something very different. Tank eased a half step, closing the angle on Rex's right without crowding him. Doc moved in on the left, coffee forgotten. The three of them formed a loose triangle around the girl without needing to say a word. Rex kept his eyes on the lot and his voice low. He asked her name, if anything hurt so badly she could not stand, and if she knew where she was. She answered in short, clipped phrases, breath still catching. Mia. Nothing broken, just scraped. No idea what town this was, only that it was the gas station off the highway she had seen through the van windows more than once on trips to a store. The man in the van, she said, told people he took in kids nobody wanted, ran a home where they were safe and grateful, and always kept busy. The way she said busy did more work than the word itself. Long days inside a building near an exit sign, sorting things, carrying things, always tired. No real school, just packets now and then at a table in the same room where the work got done. Raven did not interrupt. She watched Mia's eyes flick toward the road every time a car passed, like she was measuring how much time they had left. Doc heard the home by an exit and rescuing kids, and felt the back of his neck go tight. He had seen enough feel-good pamphlets and church flyers to know how soft language could cover hard reality. Rex let Mia talk until her breath evened out a little. He did not ask for proof. He kept her behind him, kept the others in his side vision, and counted the growing engine noise as the beige van turned in off the shoulder and rolled fully into the lot, nosing toward the pumps as it belonged there. The van rolled in under the canopy and stopped at the outer pump, engine still running, brake lights washing the concrete red. The driver's door opened, and a man climbed out, straightening his shirt like the first order of business was to look respectable. He looked like any middle-aged man passing through town on a weekday. Light button-down, sleeves rolled, dark slacks, office shoes, a thin lanyard with an ID badge on his chest. He smoothed his hair and let his face settle into the calm, patient look of someone used to explaining things to strangers. His eyes went to the girl behind Rex's shoulder, then to the leather vests, then around the lot. He clocked the trucker in his cab, the mom behind her car door, and the cashier at the store's glass. A fast scan, the kind people did when they were about to put on a show and wanted to know who was watching. He stepped away from the van, hands open at his sides, and started talking in a careful, soothing tone meant for everyone, not just the bikers. He gave his name as Daniel Lockwood and said he was the director of New Dawn Outreach Home, a place that took in kids with nowhere else to go. He talked about second chances, hard stories, and structure for at-risk youth. He called their program faith-based, supported by donations and hard work, just trying to give kids a roof and routine when no one else would. From a distance, it sounded like a tired man apologizing for a difficult kid who had bolted. Mia did not react like a kid who had just been found by someone safe. Her shoulders pulled tighter. Her hands dug into her hoodie and Rex's vest. Her eyes did not change at his name or his title. If anything, they went flat, like she had heard this speech before and knew exactly who it was for. Tank noticed the badge, the neat clothes, the way Lockwood carried himself like a man used to getting the benefit of the doubt. Doc slipped his phone out and, without drawing attention, typed New Dawn Outreach Home and the town name into a search bar. A site came up with stock photos of smiling kids and volunteers in matching shirts, language about hope and purpose, and bright donation buttons. There was a mission statement and a list of church partners, but no clear sign of state licensing or oversight. Rex let Lockwood talk. Years in uniform had taught him that people who leaned hard on titles and practiced lines were often more focused on keeping a story intact than on getting to what was real. He kept his stance easy, kept Mia behind his shoulder, and let the man from the van fill the air while the rest of the lot tried to decide which sight made them more uneasy. The clean man with the badge, or the bikers who still had not raised their voices. Mia stayed behind Rex's shoulder, but her voice carried past him. She said the man from the van was not just a driver. He ran the place she lived in, the one that took kids in and kept them busy from early to late. She called it a home because that was what the shirts and papers called it. But the way she laid out her days sounded more like a building where time was measured in tasks instead of hours. She described a long, low structure near a highway exit, the van always reaching it by taking the same turn off the interstate, passing a green sign with a white 7, then dropping down a side road until the trees thinned and the air smelled like dust and stored things. Out front, there was a normal door for customers, with a sign for New Dawn resale and a couple of racks that sometimes held used jackets. The kids, she said, did not use that door. They used the back. The back was a metal door with a yellow frame dented in one corner, like something heavy had hit it once and nobody fixed it. Above it hung an old Exit 7 sign bolted in the wrong place, crooked enough to catch the eye. Beside it, wired to a hook, was a wind chime made from bottle caps that rattled every time the door opened. She said that sound followed her into sleep. Behind that door was where busy happened. She did not get into every detail, did not linger on weight or soreness. She just set the outline. Piles of donated things to sort, boxes to move from one set of shelves to another. Wiping, folding, bagging, always one more thing to get done before anyone said stop. There were other kids there. Names like Jaden and Lila, kids who were tired a lot, kids who talked in low voices about regular schools and backyards they used to have. Some older, some younger, all running the same narrow loop under the same lights. School, as she knew it now, was packets at a folding table in the same room when there was a gap, not buses and classrooms and teachers whose names stuck. On the outside, she said, the man from the van told church people and donors that the kids were learning responsibility, that helping at the resale center gave them purpose and structure. He used words like program and opportunity when visitors came through, pointed at shelves, and called it life skills. Inside, it meant there was always something to be done, and no real line between where they lived and where they worked. Lockwood did not let all of that sit unchallenged. He eased in over her words, called what she described a work program for youth who needed structure, said staying busy was better than being idle for kids with hard pasts, framed long chore lists as teaching effort and discipline. Listening to him, Raven felt an old, familiar tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with this one lot or this one man. She had heard adults wrap control and overwork in the same soft language when she was younger, and watched kids around her accept it, because the alternative was no roof at all. Doc listened for what was missing. There was no mention of pay, no clear school schedule, and no outside eyes coming in to check how things actually ran. Tank kept his focus on Mia's body language. She did not shift like someone caught exaggerating. She held herself like someone afraid that if she stopped talking, the door with the yellow frame and the crooked sign would open in front of her again. When Rex quietly asked why she ran here now instead of waiting until the next time the van passed a town or a store, her answer was simple. If she climbed back into that van today, she had no idea when she would get another chance to step out of it on her own. Rex let a few more seconds of Lockwood's smooth explanation hang, then started asking questions that didn't fit neatly inside it. His tone stayed even, his words simple. He asked who Mia's social worker was, who at the county checked on New Dawn, whether the home was licensed by the state and under what number, which school district the kids were registered in, and if they actually attended classes or were marked as homeschooled. Alone, any one of those questions sounded harmless. Together, they sounded like a report being built. Lockwood answered with more padding than substance. He mentioned agencies in broad strokes, talked about how complicated systems were and how paperwork lagged, and said they were working with people at the county. He leaned on the faith-based angle and church partners, on how they didn't ask the state for much because they didn't want to be a burden. He never produced a single concrete name or license number. Doc scrolled past the bright photos on the New Dawn site into the fine print, looking for an official registration or link to a state database. He didn't see one. He pulled up the state's group home license list in another tab and skimmed the entries. New Dawn wasn't on it. That didn't prove the place was dirty by itself, but it killed the idea that it was clearly on someone's radar. Raven watched Mia instead of Lockwood. When Rex asked if anyone from outside had come to speak to her in the last few months, Mia shook her head. When he asked if she had ever sat with a school counselor, a guardian ad litem, a judge, anyone who wasn't part of New Dawn and wasn't a pastor or donor, the answer stayed no. Most of the adults she saw were people Lockwood brought in, people who started from his version of her story. Raven told Rex quietly that real oversight didn't look like that. In her experience, the people who truly carried weight showed up on their own schedule and asked hard questions the director didn't script. Rex didn't argue. He nodded once and made a call in his head. A kid had run barefoot out of a van, grabbed him, and said she was afraid of going back. The least he could do was make sure someone with a badge heard that from her. He caught the cashier's eye and told him to call 911, report a possible child in danger at the station, and ask for patrol cars and whoever handled child welfare in this county. The cashier, already glued to the glass, grabbed the phone. Out by the drive, the trucker who'd been watching from his cab started his rig and eased it forward just enough to block the main exit lane, then killed the engine. He didn't announce he was blocking anyone in. He just ended up where a van in a hurry would have to get past him first. The lot shifted into a quiet kind of alert. No one grabbed Lockwood. No one raised a fist. Rex stayed where he was, one hand loose at his side, the other close enough to Mia that she could feel it if she needed to. He told Lockwood that until police arrived, Mia was staying where she was, and that everyone would get the chance to tell their side to someone whose job it was to sort it out. When you believed a kid was at risk, he figured, you didn't need to win an argument on the pavement. You just needed to keep things from moving until the uniforms rolled in and started asking their own questions. The wait for sirens felt longer than it was. The air under the canopy went tight in that way it did when everyone was holding a breath. Lockwood kept talking for another minute, stringing together words about misunderstanding and cooperation, but his eyes weren't on Rex anymore. They were on the lanes, in and out. The truck now sitting across the main exit. The strip of open space by the far curb. The van door still hanging open with the engine running. When the faint rise and fall of sirens finally reached the lot, something in his posture shifted. The practiced calm pulled in hard. He took one step closer as if he meant to keep explaining, then cut sideways, faster than his shoes suggested he could move. His hand shot past Rex's vest toward the small shape behind it. Mia felt it and tried to duck back, but he caught a handful of her sleeve and yanked. It was not dramatic, just a hard, efficient pull meant to get a kid moving toward the van, whether she wanted it or not. Her bare toes scraped concrete as her weight tipped forward. Tank reacted on instinct, big frame angling in, but Doc was closer. He dropped his coffee, stepped into the line of movement, and caught Lockwood's wrist with both hands, turning it off Mia and back toward the van in one controlled motion. It was a hold Rex had drilled into them for years, enough leverage to stop someone without twisting it into a fight. Lockwood shouted about being grabbed and having his rights violated, but his hand was no longer on the girl. Mia went backward instead, straight into Raven's chest. Raven wrapped an arm around her and moved them both a step behind Tank's shoulder, using his size as a shield. Out by the drive, the trucker in the rig sat up straighter, one hand on his door handle, eyes locked on the scene. The sirens grew louder, turned into blue and red at the edge of the lot, then into 2 patrol cars and an unmarked sedan sliding under the canopy. Officers stepped out with the focused pace that came with calls about kids. Hands went to belts, not weapons. Short commands cut across the space, telling Lockwood to keep his hands where they could see them, telling everyone else to stay put. Doc eased off as 2 uniforms took over, steering Lockwood to the hood of his own van and cuffing him for safety. Another officer went to Rex, then to Raven and Mia, eyes running a quick scan for injuries. The cashier pointed from inside the glass, phone still in his hand. The trucker climbed down and stayed by his rig, ready to say what he'd seen. The lot that had been forgettable an hour earlier now held a row of bikes, a director in cuffs, a barefoot girl holding on to a cut, and a group of bikers who hadn't thrown a single punch but also hadn't stepped aside. The part where they kept things from moving was over. The part where they explained it to people with clipboards and case numbers was just starting. Detectives arrived with the last wave of cars. One of them, Carlin Guyen, took in the scene with a quick sweep that landed on Mia first, then on the cuffs, then on the line of bikes. While uniforms split people up and started basic questions, Carla stepped in where it counted. She spoke with Rex and the others one by one, kept it to what they had seen and heard rather than what they thought of the man in the button-down. Then she listened to Mia, not in the middle of the lot, but a few steps back by a patrol car where the noise was lower. Mia told the same story she had already given under the canopy. The long, low building by a highway exit, the back door with the dented yellow frame, the crooked Exit 7 sign bolted above it, the wind chime made of bottle caps that rattled every time the door opened. Carla wrote it down without pushing her. Years on the job had taught her that kids who were inventing things tended to wander. This one held a straight line and filled it with details that could be checked. Child Protective Services sent a caseworker as soon as they heard a kid had run from a van tied to a group home. By the time the sun was sliding lower over Highway 27, Mia was sitting on a blanket with a paper cup of water in her hands and a CPS worker beside her while officers finished with the adults. Lockwood was in the back of a cruiser, still talking to anyone who came close about his work and his calling. Once Carla had what she needed from the station, she moved. A patrol unit, the unmarked car, and the CPS worker took the route Mia had described. Off-ramp at the sign with the white 7. Side road past a thin strip of trees. The long, low building near an industrial stretch, New Dawn Resale, has a modest sign out front. Out back was the door that mattered. Metal, yellow frame dented in one corner. Old Exit 7 sign mounted just off level. Bottle cap wind chime clinking in a light breeze. Inside, under warehouse lights, a group of kids worked through steady motions, sorting donated clothes, pushing carts, taping up boxes. It was not shouting or open violence. It was children doing the kind of steady, repetitive labor adults were supposed to be doing. The sort of scene that could be sold as opportunity in a newsletter and read as something else entirely by people trained to see red flags. Carla and the CPS worker shut it down for the night. They paused the work, brought the kids to the front, sat them with water and snacks, and took names and ages. They asked how long they had been there, how often they went to school, and who they talked to from outside New Dawn. The answers lined up too cleanly with what Mia had already said. On paper, New Dawn had partners, donors, and a faith-based mission. In practice, it looked a lot like free labor wrapped in good intentions and left without real oversight. Back at the station, the lot had shifted from tense to tired. The cruisers were still there, lights off now, engines humming low. Mia sat on the back bumper of a patrol car with a blanket around her shoulders and a CPS worker beside her, answering quieter questions than before. The adrenaline had drained out, leaving a thin, shaky focus. She kept one hand on the paper cup of water and one eye on the row of bikes, as if checking they were still there. Inside the loose ring of tape and patrol cars, Rex, Tank, Doc, and Raven were in the slow part. Officers took their IDs, wrote down club and address, then walked back through the afternoon moment by moment. The van pulling in, the barefoot girl, the words at the pump, the way she had picked a line of bikers over every other adult in sight. The follow-ups were standard. How they knew her, whether they had any ties to New Dawn before today, and if anyone touched Lockwood before he grabbed for her sleeve. The answers stayed simple. They had never seen her before she ran at them. They had not heard of New Dawn until this stop. They had not put a hand on Lockwood until he went for the girl. Detective Carla came back once the warehouse visit was done and laid out what was coming. Lockwood was already claiming he had been attacked and blocked from doing his job. There would almost certainly be lawyers and complaints about his reputation. On the other side, there was station security footage, body camera video, and a building full of kids whose stories matched what Mia had said. The bikers had not done everything perfectly, she told them, but they had stayed on the right side of the line that mattered. They had kept a van from leaving and held things in place long enough for the system to see what was really going on. It still carried a price. Time on the shoulder meant missed shifts and plans. A long ride home in the dark with a different kind of tired. Wearing cuts and patches already drew extra eyes. Getting tied to a man with donors and church partners would not make that any easier. Rex took it in and accepted it for what it was, part of the cost of not looking away. When the interviews ended, he walked over to where Mia sat with the CPS worker. He did not tell her it would all be simple now. He knew better. What he could do was make it clear that people whose job was to look out for kids were involved, that running and speaking up had been exactly the right thing to do, and that none of this was on her. Raven added a few quiet words from the side of someone who had once sat where Mia was sitting. Mia listened, blanket pulled tight, and for the first time since she had hit the lot, her shoulders let go a little. Months later, the road dropped them into another small town and another diner that looked like a dozen others they had seen that month. The bikes cooled outside, ticking in the late heat, while the highway saints sat in a corner booth that could have been anywhere. Tank worked through a heavy plate. Doc scrolled his phone without really taking the news in. Raven watched the door out of habit. Rex sat with a mug of coffee and a folded map he did not really need anymore. When the waitress brought the check, she set down a plain envelope with his name and the clubs written on it, the postmark from the county where the gas station sat. Inside was a photo and a sheet of notebook paper folded around it. The picture showed Mia in front of a small house, paint worn on the trim but the yard clean. On either side stood a couple with the look of people who worked hard more than they talked about it. A medium mutt leaned against Mia's leg, tag bright on its collar. There was a sign for a school event staked in the grass at the edge of the frame. Mia's smile in the photo was not the tight, brittle one from the lot. It reached all the way into her eyes. The letter underneath was written in careful, uneven lines. She said the state had shut New Dawn down and moved the kids out after the investigation. People had gone through files, followed donation chains and referrals. Some churches and charities that had sent kids there were changing how they did things. She wrote that more than a couple dozen kids had been placed in new homes or better programs, some back in regular schools instead of back rooms. She mentioned the dog in the photo and said she had picked her herself. School now meant a bus, desks, teachers with names she remembered, not packets on a folding table. Every few lines, she circled back to the same idea, that the day at the gas station was the first time she had seen strangers choose her side over the easy story in front of them. Rex read the letter through, then passed it around. Tank let out a breath and shook his head once. Doc paused longer on the parts about systems changing. Raven studied the photo the way only someone who had lived under a case file could, noting posture, light, the way Mia held herself now. When the paper came back, Rex folded it along the creases and tucked it into the inside pocket of his cut with the other small proofs the road had given him that paying attention mattered. Outside, the highway waited in both directions, full of people who would never know this story and kids whose first bad day had not hit yet. The saints paid their bill, left more cash than the check needed, and walked out to the bikes. Engines turned over and rolled them back onto the road, just another line of leather and chrome to anyone passing by, but a sound that would always mean something different to one girl who no longer flinched when she heard it.